The day after my wife's funeral, my son Daniel sat across from me at the kitchen table, his eyes red-rimmed but determined. He was 32, but at that moment, he looked like the boy who used to clutch my hand at the playground, searching for reassurance. The house was too quiet. The kind of silence that presses in on your chest and makes every sound, every sigh, every scrape of a chair echo like a memory you can't quite hold on to. "Dad," Daniel said, his voice barely above a whisper, "can we talk about Mom's will?" I nodded, though my mind was 1,000 miles away, drifting through decades of shared laughter, arguments, and the quiet comfort of routine. I'd read the will the night before, alone in the study, the words blurring as I tried to make sense of what she'd left behind. The main house, the savings, her jewelry, everything was accounted for. Everything except the second house. The one she'd bought in secret, the one I'd discovered only by accident. Daniel's fingers drummed nervously on the table. "I just wanted to make sure we were doing everything the way Mom wanted. She was always so organized about these things." I forced a smile. Your mother never left anything to chance." He nodded, but I could see the questions swirling behind his eyes. He wanted to know about the details, the numbers, the things that would make sense of the loss. I understood. Brief makes you crave order, something to hold on to when the world feels like it's spinning out of control, but I couldn't tell him about the second house? Not yet, maybe not ever. The memory of how I found out about it still felt raw. 6 months before she died, I'd noticed a letter addressed to her from a real estate agency in a part of town we'd never visited. At first, I thought it was junk mail, but curiosity got the better of me. I opened it, and there was a mortgage statement, payments made in full, a property listed under her maiden name. I confronted her that night, and she just smiled. That mysterious smile she reserved for secrets she wasn't ready to share. "It's nothing, just a little investment," she'd said, brushing it off. "Something for the future." I let it go. We all have our secrets, I told myself. But now, sitting across from Daniel, I realized how little I truly knew about the woman I'd spent 40 years with. Daniel cleared his throat. "So, what happens now? Do we need to call a lawyer?" I shook my head. "I've already spoken to one. Everything's pretty straightforward. The house, the accounts, her personal things, they're all yours, as she wanted." He looked relieved, but also a little disappointed. Maybe he'd expected more. Maybe he'd hoped for a letter, a message from beyond, something to make sense of her absence. I wanted to tell him about the second house. I wanted to explain why she kept it a secret, why I kept it from him. But the words stuck in my throat. There was more to the story, more than I could say in that moment. After Daniel left, I sat alone in the kitchen, staring at the spot where his coffee cup had left the ring on the table. I thought about the second house, about the key I kept hidden in my desk drawer, about the address I'd memorized but never visited. Why had she bought it? Who was it for? And why did she never tell either of us? That night, I dreamed of her. She was standing in the doorway of a house I didn't recognize, beckoning me inside. Her eyes were sad, her smile tinged with regret. I woke up with a start, the sheets tangled around my legs, my heart pounding in my chest. The next morning, I made a decision. I had to see the house for myself. I had to understand what she'd left behind. I drove across town, the address burning a hole in my memory. The neighborhood was unfamiliar, a quiet street lined with old trees and tidy lawns. The house was small, unremarkable from the outside, a single-story bungalow with peeling paint and a sagging porch. But as I stood on the front steps, key in hand, I felt a strange sense of déjà vu. As if I'd been there before in another life. The lock turned dizzily. The door creaked open and I stepped inside. The air was thick with dust and the faint scent of lavender, her favorite. The furniture was sparse, but everything was meticulously arranged. Books on the shelves, a vase of dried flowers on the table, a photograph over as a young woman on the mantel. It was like stepping into a time capsule, a version of her life I'd never known. I wandered from room to room, searching for answers. In the bedroom, I found a box tucked beneath the bed, filled with letters, photographs, and a journal. My hands trembled as I opened it, the weight of her secrets pressing down on me. The first letter was addressed to me, written in her careful script. I hesitated, then unfolded it, my eyes scanning the words she'd left behind. "Dearest Tom," it began. "If you're reading this, it means I'm gone. There are things I never told you, things I wish I'd have the courage to share." I stopped, my breath catching in my throat. The truth was here, waiting for me. But was I ready to face it? I sat on the edge of the bed, the letter trembling in my hands. The house was silent except for the faint ticking of a clock somewhere in the hallway. I could almost hear her voice as I read, as if she were sitting beside me, whispering the words into my ear. "There are things I never told you, things I wish I'd had the courage to share. I bought this house because I needed a place to remember who I was before I became a wife and mother. I needed a space that was just mine, a place to keep the parts of myself I was afraid would disappear in the routines of our life together. I hope you can forgive me for that." I paused, the words sinking in. I had always thought we shared everything, that there were no secrets between us. But here was proof that even after 40 years, there were corners of her heart I'd never seen. The next page was a journal entry dated 3 years ago. "Sometimes I come here just to sit in silence. I think about the choices I made, the life I built, and the things I left behind. I wonder if Tom would understand, if Daniel would forgive me for needing something of my own. I love them both, but I need this." I closed my eyes, trying to picture her here alone, contemplative, maybe even a little sad. Had I made her feel trapped? Had I missed the signs that she needed more than what I could give? I kept reading, flipping through pages filled with her handwriting. Some entries were mundane grocery lists, reminders, notes about the weather. Others were more personal. She wrote about Daniel, about her hopes and fears for him, about the arguments we'd had over the years. She wrote about me too, about my stubbornness, my pride, and my inability to let go of the past. One entry caught my eye. "Daniel will ask about the will. He'll want to know why I left everything to him. I hope Tom understands why I didn't mention the second house. It's not about the money. It's about having a piece of myself that's untouched by anyone else's expectations." I set the journal aside, my mind racing. She'd anticipated this moment and had known that Daniel would come to me with questions. She trusted me to keep her secret, to protect the part of her that needed to remain separate, but was it right to keep this from him? Was I honoring her wishes, or just avoiding a difficult conversation? I wandered through the rest of the house, searching for more clues. In the kitchen, I found a set of dishes we'd received as a wedding gift, still wrapped in their original packaging. In the living room, a stack of books I'd never seen before. Poetry, philosophy, novels by authors she'd never mentioned. On the back porch, a small garden, overgrown but still vibrant. With a single rose bush in full bloom, I sat on the porch steps, the afternoon sun warming my face. I thought about the years we'd spent together, the sacrifices we'd made, the dreams we'd let go of. I thought about Daniel, about the man he'd become, about the ways he was like his mother, curious, sensitive, always searching for meaning. Down my phone buzzed in my pocket. It was a text from Daniel. "Hey, Dad, just checking in. Let me know if you need anything." I stared at the screen, my thumb hovering over the keyboard. I wanted to tell him everything, to share the truth about the second house, about his mother's secret life, about the things I was only now beginning to understand. But I hesitated. Was it my place to reveal her secrets? Or was I protecting him by keeping them hidden? As the sun dipped below the horizon, I locked up the house and drove home, the journal and letters tucked safely in the passenger seat. The questions followed me, whispering in the darkness. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay awake, replaying the day's discoveries, the words she'd written, the choices she'd made. I wondered what Daniel would think if he knew the truth. Would he feel betrayed? Would he understand? Or would it only deepen the wounds left by her passing? The next morning, Daniel called. His voice was tentative, uncertain. "Dad, can we talk? I've been thinking about Mom's will. There's something that doesn't add up." My heart pounded in my chest. Had he found out? Has someone told him about the second house? "Of course," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Come by, whatever you want." He arrived an hour later, his face drawn, his eyes searching mine for answers. He sat at the kitchen table, just like the day before. But this time there was an edge to his questions. Dad, did Mom ever mention anything about another property? I found a letter from a real estate agency on her things. It didn't make sense. I felt the walls closing in, the weight of the secret pressing down on me. I had a choice to tell him the truth or keep quiet and honor her wishes. I took a deep breath. The words caught in my throat. The next thing I said would change everything. I looked at Daniel, his face a mixture of hope and suspicion, and I realized there was no easy way out. The truth was a living thing between us, growing heavier with every second of silence. I remembered the promise I'd made to myself or protect him, to shield him from pain if I could. But secrets have a way of festering, and I could see the hurt already forming in his eyes. He slid the letter across the table. It's addressed to Mom, but it mentions a property in Willow Creek. Did you know about this? I picked up the envelope, my hands steady despite the storm inside me. I found out about it a while ago, I admitted. Your mother bought it a few years back. She kept it separate from everything else. Daniel's brow furrowed. Why? Why would she do that? I hesitated, searching for the right words. Sometimes people need a place that's just there. A place to think, to remember who they are outside of family, outside of expectations. He looked away, his jaw clenched. Have you ever been there? I nodded. Yesterday. I found something she left behind. Letters. A journal. She wrote about needing space, about wanting to hold on to a part of herself. Daniel's voice was barely audible. Did she ever talk about leaving it to me? Or to you? I shook my head. She didn't mention it in the will. I think she wanted to stay a secret, at least for a while. He stared at the table, his fingers tracing the grain of the wood. I wish she'd told me. I wish she'd trusted me enough. I reached across the table, placing my hand over his. It wasn't about trust, Daniel. It was about her. About needing something that was hers alone. He pulled his hand away, frustration flickering in his eyes. I just don't understand. After everything we went through, after all the time she told me to be honest, to share what I was feeling, why would she hide something like this? I didn't have an answer. I could only sit with him in the silence, dealing the distance between us widen. After a while, Daniel stood up. Can I see it? The house. I nodded. Of course. I'll take you there. The drive to Willow Creek was quiet, the tension thick in the air. Daniel stared out the window, lost in thought. I wanted to reach out, to bridge the gap, but I didn't know how. Every mile felt like a step further from the life we'd known, closer to a truth neither of us was ready to face. When we arrived, Daniel stood on the porch, staring at the peeling paint, the sagging roof. This is it? He asked, disbelief in his voice. I unlocked the door and led him inside. He wandered through the rooms, touching the furniture, picking up the books, running his fingers over the photographs. He stopped in the bedroom, staring at the box beneath the bed. Is this hers? He asked. I nodded. Letters, journals, memories. He sat on the edge of the bed, opening the box with trembling hands. He read in silence, his eyes scanning the pages, his expression shifting from confusion to sadness to something like understanding. After a long while, he looked up at me. She was lonely, wasn't she? I nodded. Sometimes. I think we all are, in our own ways. He closed the box, setting it gently on the bed. I wish I'd known. I wish I could have helped. I sat beside him, the weight of the years pressing down on us. She didn't want help, Daniel. She wanted space. She wanted to remember who she was before everything else. He wiped his eyes, his voice thick with emotion. What do we do now? I didn't have an answer. The house was a monument to her secrets, a reminder of the things we'd never understand. But it was also a chance to start over, to build something new from the pieces she'd left behind. We move forward, I said quietly. We honor her memory. We try to understand, even if we never really can. Daniel nodded, but I could see the question still lingering in his eyes. The truth had changed everything, but it hadn't brought the closure he'd hoped for. As we left the house, Locking the door behind us, I felt a strange sense of relief. The secret was out, but the consequences were only beginning. Daniel was quiet on the drive home, lost in thought. I wondered what he was thinking, what he would do with the knowledge of his mother's hidden life. That night, as I lay in bed, I replayed the day's events over and over. I wondered if I'd done the right thing, if I'd honored her wishes or betrayed her trust. The house in Willow Creek was no longer just a secret, it was a burden, a question that would haunt us both for years to come. But as I drifted off to sleep, I realized that some secrets are never truly buried. They linger in the spaces between words, in the silence of empty rooms, in the memories we carry with us. And sometimes, the hardest part isn't keeping the secret, it's living with the truth once it's finally revealed. The days that followed were marked by a strange, uneasy quiet. Daniel and I spoke little, each of us retreating into our own thoughts. The house felt emptier than ever, as if her absence had grown larger now that her secret was out. I caught myself listening to her footsteps in the hallway, the sound of her humming in the kitchen, the gentle way she used to call my name. But all I heard was silence. Daniel spent more time away from home, sometimes disappearing for hours. I knew he was visiting the Willow Creek house, trying to piece together the fragments of his mother's hidden life. I wanted to ask him what he found there, what he felt, but I was afraid of the answer. I was afraid that in searching for her, he would lose himself. One evening, he came home late, his clothes dusty, his eyes red. He dropped his keys on the table and sat across from me, the same spot where we'd had so many difficult conversations. "I found more letters," he said quietly. "She wrote about you. About us." I waited, my heart pounding. "What did she say?" He hesitated, then pulled a folded piece of paper from his pocket. "She wrote that she loved you, but she was afraid you'd never understand why she needed the house. She said she didn't want to hurt you, but she couldn't give up that part of herself." I nodded, swallowing the lump in my throat. "I think I understand now. I wish I'd seen it sooner." Daniel looked at me, his eyes searching. "Do you ever feel like you didn't really know her? Like there was a whole other life she kept hidden?" I thought about it for a long moment. I think we all have parts of ourselves we keep hidden, even from the people we love most. He nodded, but I could see the pain in his eyes. "I just wish she told me. I wish she trusted me enough to share it." I reached across the table, placing my hand over his. "She did trust you, Daniel. She trusted both of us. But sometimes, trust means letting someone have their secrets." He squeezed my hand, his grip tight. "I want to keep the house," he said suddenly. "I want to take care of it. I want to make it a place where I can remember her, where I can feel close to her." I smiled, relief washing over me. I think she'd like that. For the first time in days, I felt a sense of peace. The secret was no longer a burden, it was a bridge, a way for Daniel and me to connect with her and with each other. But peace is a fragile thing. The next morning, I received a call from a number I didn't recognize. The voice on the other end was hesitant, almost apologetic. "Mr. Carter? My name is Emily. I'm sorry to bother you, but I think we need to talk. It's about your wife." My heart skipped a beat. "What do you mean?" There was a pause, then a deep breath. I knew her. I used to meet her at the Willow Creek house. She helped me through a difficult time. I didn't know she'd passed until recently. I wanted to say thank you. I gripped the phone, my mind racing. "How do you know her?" "She volunteered at the shelter where I stayed. She never told anyone her real name, but she let me stay at the house sometimes when things got bad. She said it was a safe place, a place for people who needed to start over." I closed my eyes, the pieces falling into place. The house wasn't just her sanctuary, it was a refuge for others, a place where she could help people in ways she'd never told us about. "Thank you for calling," I said softly. "You've given me something I didn't know I needed." After I hung up, I sat in silence, the weight of her secret shifting in my mind. She hadn't just kept the house for herself. She'd use it to help others, to offer hope to people who had none. She'd built a legacy I'd never imagined, one that went far beyond our family. That evening I told Daniel about the call. He listened in silence, his eyes wide with surprise. She was helping people, he whispered. All this time she was helping people and we never knew. I nodded, pride and sorrow mingling in my chest. She was more than we ever realized. Daniel smiled through his tears. I want to keep the house, Dad. I want to keep it going. For her. I nodded, my own eyes wet. We'll do it together. But as we made plans for the future, I couldn't shake the feeling that there was still more to uncover. The house had been her secret, her sanctuary, her gift to others. But what else had she left behind? What other truths were waiting to be discovered? As night fell, I stood at the window, staring out into the darkness. The past was a puzzle, and I was only just beginning to see the picture it formed. The secret of the second house had changed everything, but the story was far from over. The next few weeks became a blur of discovery and quiet transformation. Daniel and I visited the Willow Creek house together, cleaning out the dust and cobwebs, sorting through the remnants of my wife's secret life. Each drawer, each box, each faded photograph revealed another layer of the woman we thought we knew. The more we uncovered, the more we realized how much she had given both to us and to strangers who had crossed her path one afternoon. As we cleared out the small attic, Daniel found a stack of envelopes, each addressed in my wife's careful handwriting. Some were unopened, others had been read and tucked away again. The return addresses were from all over the city, places I'd never heard her mention. Daniel opened one and read aloud, his voice trembling. Dear Mrs. Carter, I don't know how to thank you for what you did. The night you let me stay at the Willow Creek house, I was at my lowest. You gave me hope when I had none. I'm back on my feet now, and I'll never forget your kindness. With gratitude, Maria. He looked up at me, his eyes shining with tears. She never told us about any of this. I shook my head, overwhelmed by the scope of her compassion. She was always helping people, even when we didn't see it. We spent hours reading the letters, each one a testament to her quiet generosity. There were stories of women escaping abusive relationships, young people trying to start over, families who had lost everything. My wife had given them shelter, food, and most importantly, dignity. She had never asked for recognition or thanks. She had simply done what she felt was right. As we worked, Daniel and I talked more than we had in years. We shared memories, regrets, and hopes for the future. The house became a place of healing, not just for us, but for the legacy she had left behind. We decided to keep the house open, to continue her work. We reached out to the shelter where she had volunteered, offering the space as a safe haven for those in need. Word spread quickly. Soon the Willow Creek house was filled with life, laughter, tears, and the quiet strength of people rebuilding their lives. Daniel took charge of the day-to-day operations, pouring his energy into the project. I helped where I could, finding purpose in the work that honored my wife's memory. But even as we built something new, the past lingered. I found myself haunted by questions I couldn't answer. Why had she kept this part of her life hidden from us? Was she afraid we wouldn't understand? Or was she protecting us from something darker? One evening, as I sat alone in the living room, I found another journal tucked behind a row of books. This one was older, the pages yellowed and fragile. I opened it carefully, my heart pounding as I read the first entry. April 12, 1991. I bought the Willow Creek house today. I told Tom it was for an investment, but the truth is, I need a place to breathe. Sometimes I feel like I'm drowning in expectations of his, Daniel's, my own. I love them, but I need to remember who I own. The entries continued, chronicling her struggles with anxiety, her fears about losing herself in the roles of wife and mother. She wrote about moments of joy and sorrow, about the people she helped, about the nights she spent alone in the house, finding solace in the quiet. One entry stood out. I wish I could tell Tom everything, but I'm afraid he'll see it as a betrayal. I'm afraid he'll think I don't love him. But I do. I just need this space to be myself. I closed the journal, tears streaming down my face. I understand now. The house wasn't a rejection of us. It was a lifeline, a way for her to hold on to her identity in a world that demanded so much. The next day, I shared the journal with Daniel. He read in silence, his expression shifting from confusion to understanding. "She was so strong," he said quietly. "She carried so much, and she still found a way to help others." I nodded, pride and sorrow mingling in my chest. She was stronger than we ever knew. As we sat together, the weight of her secret felt lighter. We had found the truth, and in doing so, we had found each other. The Willow Creek house was no longer a symbol of what we didn't know. It was a testament to her courage, her compassion, and her love. But as the days passed, I couldn't shake the feeling that there was still more to this story. The house had given us answers, but it had also raised new questions. What else had she left behind? What other secrets were waiting to be discovered? And then, one evening, a stranger appeared at the door, holding a letter addressed to my wife. His presence would change everything we thought we knew again. The man at the door was in his late 40s, with tired eyes and a nervous energy that made him shift from foot to foot. He introduced himself as Michael, and in his hand he held a weathered envelope, the edges soft from years of handling. He glanced past me into the house, as if searching for a familiar face. "I'm sorry to come unannounced," he said, his voice low. "I only just heard about your wife's passing." I didn't know where else to go. I invited him in, offering a seat at the kitchen table. Daniel joined us, curiosity and caution written on his face. Michael placed the envelope on the table, his hands trembling slightly. "She saved my life," he said, looking down. "Years ago, I was at my lowest, addicted, homeless, convinced I had nothing left. Your wife found me behind the shelter, gave me food, and let me stay at this house. She never judged me. She just listened." Daniel and I exchanged a glance. We'd heard similar stories from the letters, but hearing it in person was different. Michael's gratitude was raw, his pain still close to the surface. "I tried to get clean so many times," he continued, "but it never stuck. She was the first person who made me believe I could change. She checked on me, brought me books, even helped me find a job when I was ready. I owe her everything." He slid the envelope across the table. "I wrote her this letter years ago, but I never had the courage to send it. I thought maybe you'd want to read it." I opened the envelope, unfolding the letter with care. Michael's handwriting was shaky, but earnest. "Dear Mrs. Carter, you probably don't remember me, but I'll never forget you. You saw me when no one else did. You gave me a place to sleep, a meal, and hope. I'm clean now, working steadily, and I have a family of my own. I tell my kids about the angel who saved me. Thank you for believing in me when I couldn't believe in myself." I read the letter aloud, my voice thick with emotion. Daniel wiped his eyes, and Michael looked away, embarrassed by his tears. "She never told us about any of this," Daniel said softly. Michael nodded. "She didn't want recognition. She just wanted to help. She told me once that everyone deserves a second chance, no matter how far they've fallen." We sat in silence for a moment, the weight of her legacy settling around us. I realized then that the Willow Creek house was more than a secret. It was a sanctuary, a place where broken people could find healing. My wife had built something beautiful, something lasting, and she'd done it quietly, without fanfare. After Michael left, Daniel and I walked through the house, seeing with new eyes. Every room held echoes of her kindness, every corner a memory of someone she'd helped. We found more letters, more stories, more evidence of the lives she'd touched. But with each discovery, I felt a growing sense of unease. Why had she kept all of this from us? Was she afraid we wouldn't understand? Or was there something more she was protecting us from? One night, as I sat alone in the living room, I found a small lockbox hidden behind a loose floorboard. The key was taped to the bottom of her journal. My hand shook as I opened it, revealing a stack of documents and a single photograph. The photograph was of my wife, younger than I'd ever seen her, standing beside a woman I didn't recognize. They were smiling, arms around each other, the Willow Creek house in the background. On the back, in her handwriting, were the words, "For the promises we made." The documents were legal papers, agreements, letters, and a deed. As I read through them, a new story began to emerge. The house hadn't always belonged to my wife alone. It had once been co-owned with the woman in the photograph. There were letters between them, filled with plans and dreams. Talk of turning the house into a refuge for women in crisis. One letter, dated nearly 30 years ago, caught my attention. If anything happens to me, promise me you'll keep the house going. Promise me you'll help the women who come after us. I sat back, stunned. My wife had inherited the house from a friend, a woman who had dedicated her life to helping others. She had carried on that mission quietly, faithfully, for decades. I realized then that the secret of the second house was bigger than I'd ever imagined. It wasn't just about my wife's need for space or her desire to help others. It was about a promise, a legacy passed from one woman to another. A chain of kindness stretching back through the years. As I closed the box, I knew that our story was only one chapter in a much larger tale. The Willow Creek House was a beacon, a place where hope was handed down from one generation to the next. But as I prepared to share this new discovery with Daniel, I couldn't shake the feeling that there was still more to learn, more secrets waiting in the shadows, more truths that would change everything once again. The next morning, I called Daniel into the living room and placed the photograph and documents on the coffee table between us. He studied the image, tracing the faces with his finger, his brow furrowed in concentration. "Who's the other woman?" he asked. "I don't know," I admitted. "But from these letters, it looks like she and your mother started all this together. The house, the mission, everything." Daniel picked up the oldest letter, reading it aloud. "We can't save everyone, but we can save someone. If we help even one person, it's worth it." He looked up, his eyes shining with a new kind of understanding. She was never alone in Miss. She had a partner, maybe even a best friend. We spent the day piecing together the story from the letters and legal documents. The woman's name was Margaret, and she'd been a social worker who dedicated her life to helping women escape dangerous situations. She and my wife had met at a community event, bonded over their shared desire to make a difference, and pooled their savings to buy the Willow Creek house. For years, they ran it together, offering shelter, food, and support to anyone who needed it. But then, abruptly, the letters from Margaret stopped. The last one was dated 15 years ago, filled with hope for the future and gratitude for their friendship. After that, there was nothing, no explanation, no goodbye. Daniel and I sat in silence, the weight of the unanswered questions pressing down on us. "What happened there?" he wondered aloud. I shook my head. "I don't know." "But your mother kept her promise?" "She kept the house going, even after Margaret was gone." That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, replaying the story in my mind. I wondered what had happened to Margaret, why she disappeared from our lives, and whether my wife had ever tried to find her. The more I thought about it, the more I realized how much I still didn't know. The next day, Daniel suggested we try to track Margaret down. If she's still alive, she deserves to know what Mom did. She deserves to see what the house has become. We started with the old address on the letters, but the house was long since sold. We called the social services office where she'd worked, but no one there remembered her. We searched online, combing through public records and social media, but Margaret seemed to have vanished without a trace. Just as we were about to give up, Daniel found a news article from 12 years ago. It was a small piece in the local paper about a woman named Margaret Evans who had passed away after a long illness. The article mentioned her work with women's shelters and her partnership with a close friend, Mrs. Carter. Daniel read the article aloud, his voice trembling. "She died, Dad, she's gone." I felt a wave of sadness wash over me, mingled with relief. At least we had an answer. At least we knew why the letters had stopped. We visited Margaret's grave the next day, bringing flowers and a letter from the Willow Creek house. We stood in silence, honoring the woman who had started it all, the woman whose friendship had changed the course of our lives. As we left the cemetery, Daniel slipped his arm around my shoulders. "Mom kept her promise, and now it's our turn." We returned to the Willow Creek house with a renewed sense of purpose. We hung the photograph of my wife and Margaret in the entry, a tribute to their partnership and their legacy. We shared their story with the women who came to the house, letting them know that they were part of something bigger, a chain of kindness that stretched back decades. The house became more than a refuge. It became a place of stories, of shared memories, and new beginnings. Daniel and I worked side by side, learning from each other, healing old wounds. We found joy in the work, pride in the legacy we were carrying forward, but even as we built something beautiful, I couldn't escape the feeling that there was still more to uncover. My wife's journals hinted at other secrets, other promises made and kept. There were names I didn't recognize, stories left unfinished, questions that lingered in the quiet moments. One evening, as I sat on the porch watching the sunset over Willow Creek, a young woman approached the house. She looked nervous, clutching a small bag to her chest. I recognized the look in her eyes, the same look I'd seen in Michael, in Maria, in so many others who had come to the house seeking shelter. She hesitated at the gate, then stepped forward. "Is this the Carter house?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I nodded, rising to meet her. "It is. You're safe here." As I led her inside, I realized that the story was still being written. The house was still a sanctuary, still a place of hope. And as long as there were people in need, as long as there were secrets to uncover and promises to keep, the legacy of the Willow Creek house would live on. But deep down, I knew there was one last secret my wife had left for me, one final truth that would change everything. If only I had the courage to face it. The young woman's name was Lily. She was barely 20, with haunted eyes and a voice that trembled when she spoke. Daniel and I welcomed her, showing her to the small guest room at the back of the house. She clung to her bag, glancing around as if expecting someone to tell her she didn't belong. But we reassured her just as my wife must have done for somebody before. That night, as I sat in the kitchen, Lily joined me, her hands wrapped around a mug of tea. She told me her story in fragments: an abusive boyfriend, a family that had turned their backs, nights spent sleeping in her car. She'd heard about the Willow Creek house from a woman at the shelter, someone who said it was a place where people listened, where no one asked too many questions. I listened, offering what comfort I could. I thought of my wife, of the way she'd always known how to make people feel seen. I wondered if I could ever fill her shoes, if I could ever offer the same kind of hope. After Lily went to bed, I wandered through the house, feeling her presence everywhere. The walls seemed to hum with memories, with the echoes of laughter and tears. I paused in the living room, staring at the photograph of my wife and Margaret. Their smiles seemed to hold a secret, a promise that the work would go on. The next morning, Daniel and I sat on the porch, watching the sunrise over the garden. Lily joined us, her face softer, her eyes less guarded. She thanked us for letting her stay, for giving her a chance to breathe. "It's what this house is for," Daniel said gently. "It's what my mom wanted." Lily smiled, a small, tentative thing. "She must have been an incredible woman." "She was," I replied, my voice thick with emotion. "She still is in a way. She's everywhere here." As the days passed, Lily settled in, helping around the house, tending the garden, sharing her story with the other women who came and went. She became part of the family, a living testament to the power of kindness. But even as the house filled with new life, I found myself drawn back to my wife's journals. There were still pages I hadn't read, still secrets waiting in the margins. One evening, as the house grew quiet, I sat in her old armchair and opened the final journal. The entries were now shorter, more urgent. She wrote about her illness, about the fear and uncertainty that came with each doctor's visit. She wrote about Daniel and me, about her hopes for her future, about the legacy she wanted to leave behind. One entry caught my eye. "If you're reading this, Tom, I hope you understand. The house was never just mine. It was always meant to be shared. I kept it a secret because I was afraid you'd see it as a betrayal, afraid you'd think I didn't love you enough. But the truth is, I loved you too much to burden you with the pain I carried. I wanted to protect you, to give you a place to heal when I was gone." I closed the journal, tears streaming down my face. "I understand now. The secret of the second house wasn't about distance or deception. It was about love. The kind of love that gives without asking, that sacrifices without complaint. I shared the journal with Daniel, and together we wept for the woman we'd lost and the legacy she'd left behind. We promised each other that we would honor her wishes, that we would keep the house open, and that we would continue the work she'd started. But as the weeks turned into months, I found myself haunted by one final question. In the back of the last journal, tucked between the pages, was a small, folded note. It was addressed to me in her familiar handwriting. Tom, if you ever feel lost, if you ever wonder why I did what I did, go to the attic. There's something there I want you to find. With all my love, Anna. My heart pounded as I read the note. I'd been in the attic dozens of times, but I'd never found anything unusual. What could she have left for me? What secret was waiting in the shadows, waiting to be discovered? I showed the note to Daniel, and together we climbed the narrow stairs to the attic. The air was thick with dust, the floorboards creaking beneath our feet. We searched every corner, every box, every trunk, but found nothing out of the ordinary. Just as we were about to give up, Daniel noticed a loose floorboard near the window. He pried it up, revealing a small, metal box. My hand shook as I lifted it out, the weight of years pressing down on me. Inside the box was a stack of letters, each one addressed to me. The first was dated the year we were married. The last was dated just a week before she died. As I opened the first letter, I felt her presence beside me, guiding me through the darkness. The truth was finally within reach, but I had no idea how much it would change everything I thought I knew. I sat on the attic floor, the box of letters in my lap, Daniel beside me in the dim light. The first letter was written on delicate stationery. The ink faded, but her handwriting unmistakable. I unfolded it carefully, my heart pounding as I began to read. Tom, if you're reading this, it means I'm gone, and I'm sorry for all the pain that brings. I wanted to leave you something more than memories, something honest, something true. I know you must have questions. I hope these letters help you find the answers. I glanced at Daniel, who nodded for me to continue. The next letter was dated a few years later, after Daniel was born. She wrote about the joy and terror of motherhood, about the nights she spent awake, worrying about the future. She wrote about me too, about the ways I made her feel safe, and the ways I sometimes made her feel invisible. I never wanted to hurt you, Tom, but there were times I felt lost, like I was disappearing into the roles I played. The Willow Creek house was my way of holding on to myself. I needed it, not because I didn't love you, but because I loved you so much I was afraid of losing who I was. Each letter was a window into her heart, her fears, her hopes. She wrote about the women she helped, about Margaret, about the promise they'd made. She wrote about the guilt she felt for keeping secrets, and the gratitude she felt for the life we'd built together. One letter, written after Margaret's death, was especially raw. I miss her every day. She was my anchor, my friend, my partner in this work. I wish I could tell you everything, but I'm afraid you'd see it as a betrayal. I'm afraid you'd think I loved her more than I loved you. But love isn't a pie, Tom. There's enough for everyone. I hope you can forgive me for needing both of you in my life. I paused, the words blurring as tears filled my eyes. Daniel put his hand on my shoulder. Silent support in the quiet attic. The letters continued, each one a piece of the puzzle. She wrote about her illness, about the fear of leaving us behind. She wrote about Daniel, about how proud she was of a man he was becoming. She wrote about me, about the life we'd shared, the arguments, the laughter, the quiet moments that meant everything. The final letter was dated just days before she died. The handwriting was shaky. The words hurried. Tom, if you're reading this, I hope you know how much I love you. I hope you understand why I did what I did. The Willow Creek house was never about secrets, it was about hope. Hope for myself, for the women who needed a place to start over, for you and Daniel to find each other when I was gone. Promise me you'll keep it going. Promise me you'll forgive me for the things I couldn't say. With all my love. Anna. I sat in silence, the weight of her words settling over me. I realized then that the secret of the second house wasn't a burden. It was a gift of understanding, of forgiveness, of love that stretched beyond the boundaries of life and death. Daniel and I sat together in the attic, the letter spread out between us. We talked late into the night, sharing memories, regrets, and hopes for the future. We promised each other that we would honor her wishes, that we would keep the Willow Creek house open, and that we would continue the work she'd started. But as dawn crept through the attic window, I felt a new sense of peace. The secrets were no longer shadows. They were light, illuminating the path forward. I knew there would be challenges ahead, but I also knew we would face them together, guided by the love and wisdom Anna had left behind. Still, as I gathered the letters and closed the box, I couldn't help but wonder what other stories had begun within these walls. What other lives have been changed by the kindness of a stranger? The Willow Creek house was more than a secret. It was a legacy, one that would continue long after we were gone. And as Daniel and I descended the attic stairs, I realized that the story wasn't over. In fact, it was just beginning. The days that followed felt different, as if a veil had been lifted from our lives. Daniel and I moved through the Willow Creek house with a new sense of purpose, the box of letters now resting on the mantel in the living room. A quiet reminder of Anna's love and the journey we've taken to understand it. The women who came to the house sensed the change too. There was a warmth in the air, a feeling that this place was more than just shelter. It was a home built on compassion, forgiveness, and second chances. Lily, who had once been so timid, began to blossom. She started helping new arrivals, sharing her story and listening to theirs. She organized the garden, planting flowers in Anna's memory, and painted a mural on the back wall of a tree with roots that stretched deep and branches that reached for the sky. Each leaf bore the name of someone who had found hope within these walls. One afternoon, as Daniel and I sat on the porch, he turned to me with a thoughtful expression. "Do you think Mom ever regretted keeping the house a secret?" I considered the question, thinking of all the words Anna had left behind. I think she struggled with it. But in the end, she did what she thought was right. She gave us a chance to discover her truth in our own time. Maybe that was her final gift. Daniel nodded, his gaze distant. "I'm glad we know now. I'm glad we can keep her work alive." We spent our days repairing the house, painting walls, fixing leaky pipes, and restoring the old furniture. Each task felt like an act of devotion, a way to honor Anna's memory. The community rallied around us, donating supplies and volunteering their time. The Willow Creek house became a beacon, drawing people from all walks of life, some seeking help, others offering it. One evening, as the sun set behind the trees, a woman arrived at the door with a little boy in tow. She introduced herself as Maria, the same Maria whose letter we'd found in the attic. She'd come to thank us, to share how her life had changed since Anna had helped her. She told us about her new job, her son's first day at school, and the hope she'd found in the darkest of times. As Maria spoke, I realized that Anna's legacy was alive in every story, every smile, every act of kindness that took place within these walls. The house was more than bricks and mortar. It was a living testament to the power of love and the courage to keep going, even when the path was uncertain. But as the seasons changed and the house filled with new faces, I found myself reflecting on the journey that had brought us here. I thought about the secrets we'd uncovered, the pain we'd faced, and the healing that had begun. I wondered what Anna would think if she could see us now, if she would be proud of the choices we'd made, the lives we'd touched. One night, as I sat alone in the living room, I opened the last letter from the box. It was short, just a few lines, but it carried the weight of a lifetime. "Tom, if you're reading this, it means you found your way. I hope you know how much I love you, how proud I am of the life we built together. Don't be afraid to let go of the past. The future is waiting, and you're not alone. With all my love, Anna." I folded the letter, holding it close to my heart. I knew then that I was ready to move forward, not by forgetting the past, but by carrying it with me, letting it guide me as I built something new. The Willow Creek house would always be a place of secrets and stories, of sorrow and hope. But most of all, it would be a place of love, a love that endured, even in the face of loss. As I turned out the lights and climbed the stairs to bed, I felt Anna's presence all around me. I knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, We would face them together with me, Daniel, and all the lives touched by the house she'd left behind. But just as I drifted off to sleep, a knock sounded at the door, a new arrival, a new story, and perhaps one last secret waiting to be revealed. The knock at the door echoed through the quiet house, pulling me from the edge of sleep. I hesitated for a moment, listening to the familiar creaks and sighs of the old home, then made my way downstairs. Daniel was already in the hallway, rubbing his eyes, curiosity and concern mingling on his face. We exchanged a silent glance before I opened the door. Standing on the porch was an older woman, her silver hair pulled back in a neat bun, her eyes sharp and searching. She held herself with a quiet dignity, but there was a tremor in her hands as she clutched a worn leather satchel. For a moment, she simply looked at us, as if weighing whether to speak. "Can we help you?" I asked gently. She nodded, her voice soft but steady. "My name is Evelyn. I knew Anna many years ago. I heard about the Willow Creek house from someone at the shelter. I wasn't sure if I should come, but I needed to see it for myself." Daniel stepped aside, inviting her in. We led her to the kitchen, offering tea and a seat at the table. Evelyn looked around, her gaze lingering on the photographs, the mural, the box of letters on the mantel. "I met Anna when we were both young mothers," she began. "We lost touch over the years, but I never forgot her kindness. She helped me through a difficult time, gave me advice, and listened when no one else would. I always wondered what became of her. I told her about Anna's work at the Willow Creek house, about the women she'd helped, the legacy she'd left behind." Evelyn listened, tears glistening in her eyes. "She always had a way of making people feel seen," she said quietly. "I wish I'd had the chance to thank her." She opened her satchel and pulled out a small, faded photograph. It was of Anna, Margaret, and Evelyn herself, standing in front of the Willow Creek house, arms around each other, laughing. The image was a window into a past I'd never known before. Secrets. Before a loss, before the weight of years, I wanted you to have this, Evelyn said, sliding the photograph across the table. "It's a piece of her story, and yours." I accepted the photograph with gratitude, feeling the circle of Anna's life widen once more. Here was another thread in the tapestry she'd woven, a friendship that had endured. Even in absence, Evelyn stayed for hours, sharing stories of Anna's early days, her dreams, her fears, her laughter. She spoke of the challenges they'd faced, the hopes they'd carried, the promises they'd made to each other. As she spoke, I realized how much of Anna's life had been shaped by the women around her, by friendships that had sustained her, by the quiet strength of those who had walked beside her. When Evelyn finally rose to leave, she hugged us both, her embrace warm and fierce. "Thank you for keeping her memory alive," she whispered. "Thank you for giving her story home." After she left, Daniel and I sat in silence, a photograph between us. The house felt fuller, richer, as if Anna's spirit had returned to fill the empty spaces. I thought of all the people who had passed through these doors, all the lives that had been changed, all the stories that had yet to be told. That night, as I lay in bed, I dreamed of Anna not as she was in her final days, but as she must have been when she first came to Willow Creek, young, hopeful, unafraid. She smiled at me, her eyes bright with possibility, and I knew that her story would never truly end. The next morning, I woke with a sense of clarity. The secrets, the pain, the unanswered questions, they were all part of the journey. What mattered most was the love we shared, the legacy we carried, the hope we offered to those who needed it most. As I walked through the house, sunlight streaming through the windows, I felt Anna's presence in every room. I knew that whatever the future held, we would face it together with me, Daniel, and all the souls who found refuge within these walls. And as the day began, I realized that the story of the Willow Creek house was not just Anna's, or mine, or Daniel's. It belonged to everyone who had ever needed a second chance, everyone who had ever found hope in the kindness of a stranger. The days that followed Evelyn's visit felt like the gentle closing of a long, complicated chapter. The Willow Creek house, once a place of secrets and silent pain, had become a living archive of hope and healing. Daniel and I found ourselves at the center of a growing community of women and men who had been touched by Anna's kindness, neighbors who wanted to help, and strangers who arrived at our door with nothing but a story and a need for shelter. We hung Evelyn's photograph in the hallway, beside the mural Lily had painted. It became a touchstone for everyone who entered, a reminder that the house was built on friendship, courage, and the willingness to reach out to others. The names on the mural's leaves multiplied, each one a testament to a life changed, a burden shared, a future reclaimed. One afternoon, as I sat in a garden, Daniel joined me, carrying 2 mugs of coffee. We watched Lily and a few of the other women tending the roses Anna had planted years ago. The air was filled with laughter and the scent of blooming flowers. "Do you ever regret keeping the secret?" Daniel asked quietly, his gaze fixed on the garden. I thought about it for a long moment. I regret not understanding sooner. I regret the pain it caused you and the distance it put between us. But I don't regret honoring her wishes. She needed that space, Daniel. She needed to be more than just a wife and mother. She needed to be herself. He nodded, a small smile tugging at his lips. I think I understand now. I think I finally see her not just as my mom, but as a whole person. We sat in comfortable silence, the kind that only comes after a storm has passed. I realized then that the secret of the second house had never really been about property or inheritance. It had been about trust, about the courage to let someone you love have their own story, even if you're not part of every chapter. As the sun dipped low, casting golden light across the yard, a group of children from the neighborhood ran through the gate, their laughter ringing out. Willie waved them over, handing out lemonade and cookies. The house was alive with joy, with possibility, with the promise of new beginnings. That evening, Daniel and I hosted a small gathering for everyone who had become part of the Willow Creek family. We shared stories, some funny, some heartbreaking, all woven together by the common thread of Anna's legacy. We read aloud from her letters, her journals, her words echoing through the rooms she had once walked. When it was my turn to speak, I stood in the doorway looking out at the faces gathered before me. Anna taught me that love isn't about possession or control. It's about giving, about letting go, about trusting that the people you care for will find their own way. This house is proof of that. It's a place where secrets become stories, where pain becomes healing, where strangers become family. The applause was gentle, heartfelt. I saw tears in more than one pair of eyes, and I felt Anne's presence as surely as if she stood beside me. Later, as the house grew quiet and the last guest drifted away, I walked through the rooms one final time. I paused in the attic, where the box of letters still rested, and whispered a silent thank you to Anna for her courage, her compassion, her willingness to trust me with her truth. Downstairs, Daniel was waiting for me. We stood together in the doorway, looking out at the night sky, the stars bright above the old house. "We did it, Dad," he said softly. "We kept her promise." I nodded, my heart full. "And we'll keep it for as long as we can." As I closed the door, I knew that the story of the Willow Creek house would never truly end. It would live on in every life it touched, every secret shared, in every act of kindness that began within its walls. And as I turned out the lights and climbed the stairs to bed, I felt at peace at last, haunted not by regret, but by gratitude for the love that had shaped my life, and for the legacy that would endure long after I was gone.